Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems and how our guests have turned a problem into an opportunity. This week I'm joined by Rod Garcia, Arizona-based author, publisher, and former literary agent with stories to tell. Rod, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you. I mean, I've got so many questions because you've done a lot of things.
I've done a few.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, give us some background. How did you get your start?
My trajectory was odd. My first job ever, I worked as a wrangler in Wyoming for a summer doing cattle herding, which was
like
a lot of fun. You know, I mean, that's kind of the normal thing to start with, right?
Sure.
No, nobody does that now. I actually moved on to work for a private investigator for a few years, doing basically, I was doing undercover work I was 17 years old doing undercover work for a private investigator. It was, when life is a movie to you, then, then Hollywood seems like the next step. But I always wanted to be an actor. That was my goal. As a kid, as a young adult, I thought acting was going to be my direction. And after I turned 18, I packed up and moved to Hollywood and thought I was going to be the next big thing. And the only roles I got offered were roles that I wouldn't want my parents or future children to ever see me in. So
welcome to Hollywood.
That's right. Oh my God. And decided that wasn't the direction that I wanted. I didn't want to be an actor that bad. So I was ready to kind of throw in the towel. And but I had made acquaintance with a wonderful lady named Sherry Robb, who had an agency in Beverly Hills called the AFH Agency, little agency that dealt a lot with like the MTV crowd, the
Sure.
VJs at the time, and but she had a literary side and a talent side, and she said, "Hey, I've got a spot open. You know, you seem sharp. You like to read a lot. I've got a spot open here for someone just to kind of go through manuscripts and decide what belongs in the slush pile." And so, which felt like a huge, responsibility, deciding
Right.
whose stuff. And in the beginning, of course, I didn't want to put anything in the slush pile, and I learned really fast.
Yep.
Why it existed, but moved from that into some editing and into and being a story analyst, and ended up becoming an agent as well. Did some literary, and then went on to talent and worked with a lot of the folks over at MTV, like Nina Blackwood and some of the other folks. I'm old enough that those were my crowd.
Sure. So how did you decide to move from agent to author? I mean, that's you start reading all this stuff, you get into it, but what makes you decide to switch sides?
So that was kind of an odd thing. I didn't really plan on doing that. I had given up on the acting part of it, and so I just figured being a part of the entertainment industry was definitely my direction. And but I never thought of being one of the entertainers,
Right.
If that makes sense. And so I decided to go back and actually finish my degree. And so I was taking some college courses in the early 90s. I took a cartooning class, and as I typically do with most things, I can't just do something part way. I have to take it as far as I possibly can. So for my final project for the cartooning class, I actually wrote, drew, and colored the whole thing. Did an actual comic book, a full-size comic book for my project, and got some really good reviews on it, got some good feedback, and decided that this was about the time that Marvel was going through their whole bankruptcy problem. So comics had gone from being very lucrative to suddenly Marvel is declaring bankruptcy and licensing out their products just so they can stay in business. Suddenly comic books were not a viable direction. So I said, rather than risk having my properties, my characters be stolen or whatever, I started writing them into novel format. In the early 2000s, my son was born in 2001. My daughter came a little after that, but not long after my son was born, I knew that I didn't want my kids growing up in the industry. Having been in the industry from the late 80s all the way through, there were a lot of folks that I knew that started very young and that I met at that time when I started, and I watched them go through some awful things.
Yeah.
And it's a meat grinder. And they really, there's some wonderful people, but there are also some awful predators. And I thought doesn't seem.
Yeah. That's, I mean,
go ahead.
Look, I work in the business, right? So I'm in the industry every day, sort of. I mean, as much as anybody can be. The way that I think it is for people who come from outside, who don't yet always get the game from the get-go, because there is this concept of, if you grow up in it, if you're around it, and you understand what the real name of the game is and what people are actually going for and what their motivations are, and that it's a city of manufactured illusion, right? Out here in LA. I think there's a book, what is it called? The Mirage Factory is about the invention of LA and just creating all this stuff. Once you understand that we manufacture illusion, you go, okay, that's the name of the game. Everything is false. Everything is artifice. Everybody is trying to be something they're not, to show something they're not, and to kind of get there before they've got it. I mean, that's the name of a producer, right? That's the game. You go, I've got a project I don't even actually have the rights to yet, right? I've got, is that something you might be interested in? Great. Now I'll go talk to this guy and try and make him a deal to take that, so I can take it over here and grab that actor and bring this before I've actually got anything, right? Because I certainly couldn't be affording to buy all this stuff. So that will eat your soul. I mean, that is the bottom line, is it will eat your soul, especially if you don't know that it's there, or you start young and you get into that stuff. Man, is that hard. And I totally get it, because I wouldn't want my kids anywhere near it, because it's not life. It's not real.
It isn't. Yeah. And it's funny. I've had that conversation with people before, and they'll argue that it is, but it's their real life, and it's not everyone's real life, and it's not meant to be real life. It's still artificial, as you said. Yeah. They're just living in they're kind of the real world version of the Truman Show. You know, they're out there. And I've heard it said before that the Truman Show was really just a larger, allegory for celebrity in general. Just saying, you get child stars, and they don't know the difference between who their friends are and who the people are watching them. And nobody wants their kids to go. Well, I suppose that's not true. We've seen examples of parents who will shove their kids right into it. But,
yeah. I mean, we can go on and on about the error of the ways of people who are in the business and child actors and all that stuff. Yeah. I think the complicated thing for a lot of people is that what they think it's like isn't what the day-to-day ends up being.
No, not at all.
And so people kind of go into it with this false sense of how it's going to be. And I think they go in a lot of life. People go into a lot of different situations going, once I get that thing, everything's going to be great. Once I get that promotion, once I get that car, if I get that house, then money will rain from the heavens and I will be set for life, and then I'll be happy. And yeah, that's a hard one. Just that always got to be the next thing, because at least they've shown, my understanding, that we ride this kind of hedonic treadmill of going on to the next thing, because that new thing, getting that new phone or that house or that car, it might increase your baseline level of happiness briefly, but then you return to baseline. So
that's right.
You start writing, and we've talked a little bit about it. I read a little bit about it. Your first experience writing wasn't as positive as you would have hoped.
Yeah.
And it took you away from writing for a little while. Talk me through that.
So it took a while, like I say, to come back to the actual writing. But when I did, I actually ended up with a writing partner. We were working on a project together that ended up getting published. The publisher was small. We were both super excited to get signed on. And it felt like exactly what you described. This is it. This is the thing that is going to put us here. Unfortunately, and I don't want to disparage the publisher as much as just saying it wasn't having worked in the industry and having seen how a lot of talent was taken care of by a more traditional agency. When I got signed on, I really wasn't thinking, this is going to be different. No, I was kind of thinking this is how everything works. And it was a very naive way of looking at it. The publisher was pretty hands off, and there wasn't any real advertising done. There was nothing. There was no marketing. And so it felt very anticlimactic, and then to top it off, the relationship kind of broke down in between. The writing relationship broke up, and it was like, this just isn't going to work at all. And so I was very discouraged for about a year. Just really didn't want to do any of it. I felt like I had to, like, I'm sure you've heard it before. People they feel like they've failed. Yeah. And then I started to look back, and I thought, well, I mean, maybe I did, along in certain aspects, but then in some aspects I was failed as well. And I thought, I think I can do better for others, which is why I started the publishing company myself. And I thought I had a literary agency for a short period of time, and I thought maybe that was going to be how I was going to help. Sure. Decided that actually doing the publishing itself made more sense. Started a little publishing company, brought on a couple of authors, waited until this year actually to publish my own book first, finally. And but I wanted to start small, and I wanted to do better by whoever I brought on board. I didn't want to overload and bring on too many people that I couldn't handle. I couldn't give them the attention they deserved. Yep. And more than anything else, I didn't ever want to be the reason someone gave up. Yeah. I didn't ever want to be the reason someone took that last final sigh and said, all right, I'm done. This is clearly not for me, when I could have done better for them. Yeah. So would that everybody were like that, we would be in a much brighter and happier world. I think that it's hard. It's hard for everybody to be on all the time and be our best selves all the time. But when you've seen it from the other side, and you have that empathy, and you see what it's like to have been published and have not gotten the experience and have not been able to benefit from focus and exposure and all those things, to how important it can be to do those little things and the big things, but to really make somebody feel like we're partners in this. I'm not just tossing this book out into the ether and hoping that maybe it catches on. That is kind of the model for some small movie producers in Hollywood, is to just bankroll a bunch of things, and whatever comes out, whatever hits, something will hit, and then it'll go and we'll be okay. Yep. As long as we're profitable, it doesn't matter where. Yeah. And as an example, my dad sold insurance for more than 40 years, and it's residual income. If one account went away, it didn't matter, because there was something coming from somewhere. And I've always looked at, like you said, the general model as very much like that. It's residual income. And it's like, so as long as it's a scatter shot, we know that there's enough out there. Yeah. And it would be easy to look at it that way from a publishing standpoint and say, you know what, I'll bring as many people on as possible. And as long as one of them is profitable, I'll be profitable. But then again, at what cost? Right. Yes. And that's, boy, is that a question that we're all, or all should be asking when we get into any kind of business or dealing with people in general, is just, okay, that's a way to do it, but at what cost? There's a component of ignoring the compromises that we might be making, that we look at the choices right in front of us and go, okay, A or B, great. But the downstream effects, the what it might cost us in the future, and we discount that so much from whatever we eat, whatever we do, however we are. There's a great graphic that's been around the internet for a while, of kind of a bunch of different decision trees moving along. And it's like half of this tree is gone because you made decisions long ago that are out of your world. And either you're going to end up on an upward trajectory, or you're going to end up on a downward one based on the decisions you make all along. And Yeah.
Really? I mean, hey.
I think I learned as much from Chutes and Ladders as I did from life.
There you go.
Or
there
Monopoly.
You go.
You don't always go up.
So
like
talk to me a little bit about your book, In Game. You just published it, November, right?
November, yeah.
Tell me about the book.
It was, it's been a long time coming, and it was a culmination of a few books that I had been working on from time to time and just kind of putting energy into, but never feeling like they were going where I wanted them to. And then suddenly I thought, wait a minute, these two storylines actually converge and become something completely different. Mm-hmm. And I love to read scientific journals and fringe science. Big fan of Roddenberry's style, in that he always liked to know that if I'm going to write about this, I want to know that it's not necessarily science fact, but potentially science fact. And
there's a certain truthiness to it, to quote Stephen Colbert. Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a few things that he scrapped for the show because he had his science buddies that said, nope, never going to be possible. According to what we understand about physics and whatnot, never. But the stuff that he did put in, they had all said, based on what we understand, potentially. And so he only did that. Michael Crichton, Philip K. Dick, some of my favorite authors. And so it was only natural that eventually I'd kind of write a dystopian future, tech gone wrong type of story, which is Endgame. But I also am a dad. I've got a couple of teens. Well, my son just turned 21 a few days ago, and that's
congratulations,
just crazy.
Yeah,
thank you. And so one teen and one young adult. But in having them grow up, a lot of my work evolved from stuff that would definitely be more focused on an adult mind. And I don't mean it's just more like Stephen King dark, to stuff that could be digested by a broader audience. And so my between my two kids, they've inspired the main character a good bit. And in fact, my son is the model for the cover, which is a lot of fun. He's just right in the age range for the main character. But Endgame is basically, it's tech gone wrong. It's about a young man who finds himself in a bad situation. He's been beta testing video games for his father for years, but they're not your typical video games. They're neural interface. And so he jacks in, and when he's finished with the game, they remain in his head as real memories. And again, it's based on tech that I've been reading about, based on quantum tech and whatnot, that is likely possible eventually. He's involved in a terrible accident, and to save his life, his father interfaces the quantum database that the games are held in with a colleague's nanotech to basically reboot his son's brain. And it's when the nanotechnology and the quantum database combine, they basically create a sentience that is now trying to fill in the gaps, because all it sees is what is Packard see. Packard Campbell is the main character. Yep. And you're the only person aside from my wife, I think, that will know this now. And then now, of course, anybody who's listening. But Packard's name was based on Packard Bell, which was one of the original computers out there. And Campbell is where the Silicon Valley started. So I gave him some tech roots. And his father, Hal, is, of course, based on the HAL 9000. And there's a little meta in there as Hal makes some jokes about the HAL 9000 now and then, the dad jokes. But Packard, all of these memories are still game-based, and the system's trying to fill in the blanks.
I like it. That's so now I'm looking forward to reading the book. And everybody out there, grab this book right away. We'll send you the link will be at the end of the episode and in the show notes. But so how did the process of writing it go? How long did it take you to write it? What is your writing process?
Well, it's interesting. It's actually, and again, I feel like it's all a bit of an evolution. And the more focused I became on the writing, my style changed. I was very loose. I was very fast and loose with my writing. I have, at any given time, I'll have 10 to 12 different books that I'm writing. But the problem is when you're writing 10 to 12 different books, it'd be like having 10 to 12 different paintings. I mean, eventually, which are you ever going to finish any of them? And my wife and I had a conversation, and she said, "So which one is your most viable?" And we talked about a few of the different books, and we definitely decided that Endgame, because it actually it extends beyond the story itself. There's all these other books that I've been working on, but it kind of incorporates them into the games that Packard has played. So there's little nods to other stories out there that are in development or have been published that are considered games in his world. So it's kind of, so my process when it came to writing was, in the beginning, I was just kind of enjoying the process. And then my wife, after we had the conversation, I said, you know what, I'm going to focus on this 100%. And it was interesting. I went from about a third finished, and I finished the entire balance of the book in about 30 days. I was writing on average about 30 pages a day. And that was in addition to working a regular job. So I would start in the morning and write and work, and then go back and write some more. And I did all the cover art myself as well. And but the creative process is wonderful. I love the spark.
I encourage anybody can write. This is just like the beginning to Ratatouille, the Disney movie, but where they say anyone can cook.
Yes.
Anybody can write. Almost anybody can do it. But not everybody can be great. And not everybody's going to be a best-selling author. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to tell your story. If you've got a story in your head, you should absolutely sit down and do it. And you don't need anybody else to do it for you. You don't need to go get you don't need to go, I've got this great idea, and try and get a Hollywood screenwriter to come in and write it for you. You should write it. It's your story. You should do it. You should, sit down, write that book, get it out there, get it going, figure out what you can do. And even if nothing happens with it, you will have told your story.
It's so cathartic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing it on paper, finishing it, writing those last words, and whether or not you put the end or an epilogue or whatever you do at the end, it's so cathartic. There's something that is very emotional about seeing it through to completion, at least for me. I find every time I finish something like that.
And that's the important thing, is to finish. Your first job as a writer on your first draft is to finish, to write the end.
Yep.
And that's really it, because you can only do one thing with each pass. You can't. It's weird. I look at screenplays a lot, but because that's my business. But there's only one thing you can do with each pass. So your first pass, just to finish. The second pass, you can go through. You can punch up the scenes, clean out, do some editing, do whatever you want to do, and then you keep kind of sifting it through to make it great. I mean, there's a lot of rewriting that has to go on when trying to make something great. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of kind of substandard work, is somebody got fed up with it and was like, this is good enough, send it out. And that's dangerous for self-publishing and all that. That's what people are missing, is the editor going, I really miss this character, or I miss this thing that you had, and this needs another pass to really punch up the things, because this is confusing and that's not, and blah, 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 right? So when you write the end, right, start from that blank piece of paper and get all the way through to writing the end, you have accomplished something. Now you've got something to talk about. And whether it is to somebody else or to your partner or your children, I wrote a book. I did it. I completed. It may not be perfect, but it's finished. And any project you do, that's key. So a couple of questions. We're kind of coming to the end here, but what would you what's your biggest piece of advice to young writers just starting out?
Finish. You said it. I mean, that's the absolute first thing. Finish. It doesn't have to be perfect. The other words that you used, and I think so many people forget that these words exist, is first draft. It is a first draft for a reason. It's okay. Get it out. You don't have to polish it as you go. Nobody's reading it as you go, unless you have beta readers. I'm at the point where I'll go through and I'll finish a section, and I'm very fortunate. My wife is my editor. Mm-hmm. So she'll edit a section, and then I'll let my beta readers kind of test it so we can go back and on the next draft. use advice, but or use their input. But aside from just finishing, there's a big difference between being a storyteller and being a writer.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that are wonderful storytellers, but not great at the mechanics of writing. Yeah. Tell the story. It's just as important as finishing the book. It's the same. Tell the story. It doesn't have to be grammatically perfect. Not everybody, unfortunately, has an editor in their pocket.
Right.
Or
in their household too.
Or in their household, yes. I'm very fortunate. And she's awesome, and it's a huge boon to me. But honestly, there is something, and like you said, you can't just you shouldn't just send it out there and say this is good enough now. Right. I know a lot of people who are really good storytellers, but just not great with grammar, and where does the punctuation go, the stuff that looks good on paper versus the story. You could hear some of these people's books as an audiobook and go, holy cow, that's amazing. Yes. When you try to read it, it's a different thing. And so keeping those things in mind, I'd say the other thing that's really important, and being in the publishing industry, and this may be something you've come across, people always ask me, why do you need a publisher? And as a publisher, of course, you want to tell them why they need a publisher. But the reality is not everybody does. I always tell people, if you're only writing one book or a couple of books, and maybe they're self-help, maybe it's a martial arts manual or something, and you write it and that's the product that you want, and then publish it, because nobody is going to market it as passionately as you will. You can get it out there and you can get behind it. A small publisher that is going to pick up a single book isn't likely, at least the ones that are out there, aren't likely necessarily going to give it a lot more than you will. Right. All you're doing is giving up part of your profit at this point. Yes. If you're writing more than one book, or you're writing a series, or you have the aspirations to write a lot, a publisher is wonderful, because on the flip side of marketing your own stuff, now you're putting time into marketing your own stuff when you should be writing. So it's a balancing act. Yep. But if you're going to be writing a lot, try to find the publisher. Yeah. And then the final thing, and I kind of always go back to the J.K. Rowling thing, 50 no's and 51 was yes.
Yep. You got to be
for everybody.
Yes, there is. And you got to be persistent.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to take a no from one person as an actual no, like, no, it's not for us, and then move on. I have seen, and I find it particularly annoying, when people don't take no for an answer. I know that you've been told that in negotiation training and all this stuff.
Yes.
It's not for us. And I mean that in the honest sense, to say, you would do much better with somebody else, because we're not going to put the effort and the energy behind it, because it's not for us. It's not. I mean, you want a raving lunatic advocate going out pushing this material to the town, to the world. You don't want me as going, I don't see it, I don't get it, It's not over. I'm not going to push it over some of the other projects I've got sitting on my desk that I love, that I think are fantastic. Doesn't mean it's not good. Just my own personal thing, but it's not for us, right? Take that as a no and move on, because there are plenty of other places that might say yes. And again, 50 of them may say no. The 51st is going to say yes.
All it takes is the one.
So we're getting to the end here. I have two questions I ask everybody. These can be general or specific to your own business and industry, or, like I say, general about the world. What is the biggest fallacy that you think everybody buys into, but that's total hogwash? What's tremendously overrated?
Well, that money buys happiness. Yep. I will say that is number one. Happiness can be bought. Yep. Now, that's not to say that money can't buy peace of mind, because when you don't have it, it can be miserable. But I have also lived in a world where I've seen a lot of very wealthy people who are absolutely miserable as well.
Very unhappy.
But they can pay the bills.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that, and to that end, a certain amount of money can avoid certain kinds of unhappiness.
Yes.
There's like a baseline level. And I think they've even researched it. And it was something like the median income of the United States was about what it was. Like, you can go to the grocery store, you can buy what you want to buy, and you're not suffering. You can afford an apartment or whatever, housing. You take care of the kind of basic needs. And beyond that, and kind of being able to do what almost everybody in America can kind of do, which is walk into a grocery store and somehow or another buy what food they want to buy and walk out. Yeah. We're all tremendously wealthy in that sense, even if we don't have fancy cars and iPhones and all that. So the converse, what do you think the most underrated concept is? What are people missing?
We've kind of evolved into a world where we are, and you brought it up earlier, the kind of the fallacy of the entertainment industry, what we see, and honestly, I think that. And I don't know what I want to say, the American dream, but the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. Mm-hmm. I think we all try to live by, if not unattainable standards, we try to live by everybody else's standards. And I think we're too busy trying to, with social media and everything else. And hey, I'm all for social media. It's been wonderful being able to use it to help market and do whatever, connect with people from years ago. But honestly, on social media, so many people are trying to portray a life that isn't real. Mm-hmm. And they will destroy themselves trying to be something they're not. And then wonder why they're not. It hurts so many people mm-hmm. trying to keep up with everyone else and trying to be like everyone else. And I mean, the influencers that are out there that we see that are living lives that are completely unattainable and wondering why we don't have that and not seeing what we do have.
Yeah. So we need more of seeing what we do have, looking at that. What we've got and what we have. Thank you, Rod, so much for joining me on today's podcast. Folks, if you want to know more about him, you can find him on his website at rodrgarcia.com and learn more about his publishing company at epiphanymill.com. Until next time, I'm Andrew Wallace, and we don't have a problem, we've got an opportunity.